Alright, first video in my new home. Do you like it? Do you like it? Okay, let's get started. What's up, everyone? My name is Denzel Mensah. In case if you do not know me, I am a life and personal development relationship coach in ENFJ 9 Wing 1, and I am here to talk today about, is Isabel Briggs Myers racist? Now, the reason why I bring this up to begin with is because I received an email from a client recently, an ex-client recently, pretty much stating how she wanted one of our profiling sessions to be removed from my YouTube channel, and also she wanted to pretty much just have like no parts to do with Myers-Briggs because she had received information from someone in her life proving that Isabel Briggs was racist, and this client of mine is black, and she very heavily supports black people and everything. And if you've been in this community long enough, maybe a lot of y'all haven't really realized, but there's not much pigmentation represented, and I feel like this is a big reason why. Now, I am going to hold off on the direct answer to the question that's looming in the title, because first I want to go through some things, and I will try not to drag this. Honestly, I feel like this is going to be a pretty straightforward kind of video. But in essence, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of history. And so, if you guys don't already know, Isabel Briggs Myers is the daughter of Catherine Briggs. Catherine Briggs was an INFJ who pretty much did studies on Isabel until Isabel went to college. So Catherine Cook Briggs was born on January 3rd, 1875, and she died on July 10th, 1968. She spent pretty much her whole life dedicated to examining and pretty much observing Isabel, her daughter, up until Isabel went to college and pretty much was like happy to get away from Catherine in a way and not be like kind of like her hamster. Catherine kind of went into this postpartum depression in a way, and began to start, looking into other things to make her life's work, like better. And she came across Jung. And when she came across Jung's work, then pretty much she discarded all the work that she started, researching on Isabel. And that's when she started to like really study and, examine a lot of Jung's work. Now, years later, after Catherine read Psychological Types in 1923 and everything like that, World War III happens, and it gets Isabel interested in her mother's studies. And so Isabel wanted to be helpful to humankind, and that's when she pretty much started looking to a lot of, also Jung's work, as well as what her mother was, creating from that. Isabel pretty much went from there to, long story short, become the person who developed the MBTI, which is the Myers-Briggs type instrument, that we now know of it today. The E versus I, N versus S, F versus T, P versus J kind of thing. And this was not meant to be a comprehensive history of the history of the Myers-Briggs, but what I've said is kind of important because from there, Isabel also had other works, in the making. So Isabel was a successful mystery novelist in the late 1920s, and she wrote a second novel that wasn't advertised and difficult to track down in a mainstream library. The novel's name was Give Me Death. that focuses on a team of detectives that are investigating an old aristocratic Southern family, Darniles, that are committing a series of suicides because they believe they have a drop of African American blood in their veins. Wow. So, pretty much right from there, you can see how this could be problematic to a lot of people. And then, if you guys have watched the documentary on HBO called Persona, this is actually where like you can get more in depth from a lot of what I'm talking about here, because I'm not trying to give you necessarily like a history assignment here or a history discourse here. But I just wanted to kind of give you like a little bit of a gist of how things, happened and who Isabel Briggs was. For those of y'all who just are familiar with, I don't know, Frank James and Antonia Dodge or Joe Mark Witt, Dario, whoever. But then and maybe even just Carl Jung. But like then it's like, oh, why do they call it the Myers-Briggs test? Well, now you know who Myers-Briggs is. With Isabel, in the Persona documentary, they also talk about how she pretty much had a separate test for men and women due to like T and F preferences, because she pretty much felt like you couldn't properly test women for thinking functions since they're like socialized, and then you couldn't also properly test men for feeling functions because they're socialized in a way. So she had like different tests for the men and women, which in the Persona documentary, they kind of presented this as if this was like a bad thing. I don't know, maybe I'm showing how much of a man I am, but I felt like that was kind of like fair. Like if you're socialized to be viewed in a certain way, then I don't know how different the tests are, but it seemed like she had a specific test in that way so that she could just identify like, okay, are we falling into some biases? Let me try to like get past that. Now, granted, the Persona documentary also says that Isabel did not run tests on people who were under the IQ of 100 because she believed they weren't cognitively capable enough. I don't really 100% know what that means, but obviously that was somewhat problematic as well. Now, this book, Give Me Death, I admittedly have not read it yet. I actually took a considerate amount of time to really think about like should I really like order the book and read through the whole thing and all of that. But then I thought about it, and to be honest, my focus is mainly on the answer, because whether or not she is/was racist, which again we're getting to that incrementally, the focus comes in on a different route. So this book, Give Me Death, I did do a lot of research on it, and I read from various sites, like things about the book. And essentially there were some sites that gave me quite interesting information. So on one site, it pretty much said that the horrifying secret, when it's revealed 3/4 of the way through the book, is apt to produce in the modern reader, I suspect, more irritation with than sympathy for the Darnell family. Indeed, after learning the secret and having witnessed the ludicrously over-the-top histrionic reactions of the family members to it, one would have to be forgiven for thinking a better title for the novel might have been Too Stupid to Live. For my part, I was about ready to give up on the book at that point, but the last quarter of Give Me Death is a honey of an extended coda that atones for the risible Darnell uproar over the dread secret. So essentially on that site, the writer of the site insinuates that yes, this dreaded secret, which was spoiler alert, there is African American blood in the Darnell family, or at least so they believe, and because they believe there's a drop of it, then they are committing suicide. However, just because someone writes such a book, does that make them automatically racist? Now hear me out before you hang up the phone, click up another video, or anything like that. It's not necessarily to defend Isabel, because I actually was like, oh, that's a little bit alarming when I heard about that. But then it's like, like what made her think of such a thing and whatever. And again, I have not read the book yet at the making of this video, because once again, I feel like there's a greater point that I'm going to end with that really does answer the question. That's more important in my opinion. But essentially, from what I've been reading about the book, it seems that even though Isabel writes of crazy characters that, as this writer also said, are pretty ludicrous and are supposedly or allegedly committing suicide over such a very stupid thing to begin with, it doesn't necessarily mean that Isabel herself shares the same values and the same thoughts as the characters that she's writing about. She could, but that's not enough evidence to actually believe so, especially because it's been insinuated in several different places, and I'm planning to read the book to, see for myself. But it's been insinuated that the way the book ends pretty much gives notion like, oh, if you're actually reading this book, then you can tell that Isabel's not actually racist. Because the way that it ends, if anything, it seems to be showing how stupid these people were to be committing suicide, allegedly, over such a very ludicrous thing. And so it seemed a little bit hasty to say that Isabel herself was racist just because she was writing or she had characters in her own story that were racist. They were not necessarily, at least as far as we can tell, extensions of herself. And if anything, it seemed like she was kind of doing the opposite and exposing them as stupid, even with that time period back then. Now, on the official Myers-Briggs website, Isabel's granddaughter actually has a note on there where pretty much she says, as grandchildren of Isabel Briggs Myers, the woman who created the Myers-Briggs type indicator, we object to the statement in the recent documentary Persona, The Dark Truth Behind Personality Tests, that our grandmother was racist. That is a very serious charge. Our grandmother strongly believed that all human beings, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, nationality, have unique special gifts. She spent her life's work helping people better understand and develop their personal gifts and those of others. For that reason, her final book describing psychological type was entitled Gifts Differing. Over the decades, it took for her to develop and refine the MBTI assessment. She was driven by her fierce commitment to help all people appreciate individual differences. The claim of racism in the documentary is based on one of the mystery novels Isabel authored before turning her full attention to the MBTI assessment. Isabel wrote Give Me Death as a follow-up to her prize-winning first mystery novel, Murder Yet to Come. Both works of fiction follow a detective team working to solve murders. Give Me Death is about the members of an aristocratic Southern white family who are done in by their own reactions to having a mixed race heritage. Their reactions, set within the racist Southern culture of the 1930s, drives the surprise plot twist that solves the murder mystery. The fact that Isabel wrote a fictional murder mystery that included racist characters doesn't make her racist. Novelists often write about characters who are evil, misguided, and disagreeable. This does not mean the author shares or condones their actions and beliefs. We know from the many years we spent with Isabel until her death in 1980 that she did not share the beliefs of those characters. The additional claim in the documentary that this long out-of-print book that did not sell well, unlike her first mystery novel, was being hidden, quote-unquote, is baffling. Any Google search shows that copies of the book are for sale, and there are online reviews, including one from 2012, that did not confuse the author with her characters. The New York Times reviewer in 1934 gave Give Me Death a rave review, writing, The final solution of the mystery comes as a complete surprise and brings to a dramatic close a story that is notable not only for its tense situations and its admirable character drawing, but also for its fine literary quality that sets it apart from all but the very best examples of recent mystery fiction. Isabel made understanding patterns of type preferences her life's work. The differences and similarities between people, that's what drove her. Systematically exploring patterns and how individuals make sense of and reach judgments about the world. One of her original motivations in the early 1940s was fighting the intolerance of differences among people that led to the atrocities of World War II. She repeatedly shared her hope with us that her work could prevent the occurrence of similar events. She believed that by understanding our own strengths and weaknesses and those of others, we could develop our own potential and better understand and respect others. It was an all-consuming task that she finished on her deathbed with her book, Gifts Deferring. So obviously, that is a lot. And clearly her granddaughter believes that if she were here today, Isabel would want to correct a lot of these ways of using type that would eliminate discrimination. And the book actually atones for the racist implications in the end. So was Isabel Briggs Myers racist? I don't think so. But here's where actually my opinion of everything really comes into play, which I feel like all of you have probably been waiting for. And this is going to sound probably bad, but it's Candid Concepts. So here we are. Honestly speaking, I don't think it really matters if she were racist. I think that falls into the genetic fallacy, which is pretty much the notion that because something has probably like immoral roots of some sort, then it contaminates everything else that comes with it. And I feel like that's a very gross oversimplification. So when I received this email, then, I was kind of sad. Oh, not kind of. I was very saddened by it because, I've been really, especially as an African American myself, personally, I do not really see a lot of African American people being represented in the type community. I've been seeing more since I've been here on YouTube, but usually when people are talking about type celebrities, then it's mainly like white people, and there's nothing wrong with white people. I myself am not racist or discriminatory in that way, but it's just nice to see more black shows, more black celebrities being, celebrated and, like talked about in a typology way instead of like just, people who are really like we really don't relate to culturally all the time. It's like the only honorable mentions are sometimes like Oprah, and stuff of that nature. And so we try to bring like a little bit more like sauce, a little bit more like melanin into the picture. And this was yet again like another client now who I was excited for to, get involved in this community, and now it's kind of like moved away from it, understandably. But what I told the client was essentially this whole idea, once again, of like the genetic fallacy. Like, the way that I see it, it kind of goes back to the whole idea of like, Christians have this belief a lot of times that the Enneagram is demonic, and they wonder if, God would be happy with us using the Enneagram. To me, it's kind of like if somebody, for example, created the hammer, and the hammer was originally created to bludgeon people, to kill people, murder people, whatever. And then I started using the hammer to instead now build homes for homeless people. If a homeless person came to me and was like, I no longer want to, live in the home that you built for me because it was built by a hammer, and those were originally used to kill people, I feel like most of us would agree that that doesn't really make much sense. Now, does it? The reason why it would not really make logical sense is because at that point, does it really matter what the hammer was originally intended for if now it's been redeemed, atoned to now do a lot of good? In my opinion, not really. Because now, if anything, the people who probably originally created it to, like, kill people or whatever, like, they're not really benefiting from it. If anything, you're using it to save people. And I feel like, first of all, the Myers-Briggs obviously was not created to, discriminate people and to make people feel worse about themselves. But it's used to help people. You know what I mean? So now to go even further with that, I know for my coaching, I've seen this heal families. I've seen this heal couples. I've seen this heal lots of relationships, including people's relationships with themselves. So much insecurities, so many things that they've dealt with. And to me, it was to the point where, like, when I was originally presented, the idea, like, oh, Isabel, it's a racist and everything like that, I was definitely alarmed, like, dang, really? And of course I thought to myself, like, oh, well, 1930s or whatever, like, it was a different time period. Not that it was right, but it's like, it's understandable, I guess, whatever. But then I also thought to myself, doesn't really matter. She's dead and gone now. She's not benefiting from this. But other people, my clients, are benefiting from this. And so that being said, if it helps you and it's, something that's, actually improving your quality of life, then whether or not Isabel Briggs was racist, I personally feel like it's irrelevant because now we've redeemed it and we're using it for good. Once again, it goes back to the whole thing with the Enneagram and how Christians, thought like, oh, maybe it's like, is it demonic and all of that. It's like, I don't think that Jesus is upset that we are using a tool to be able to help families and relationships, keep people from divorcing, helping people to understand themselves better, their strengths, and use that to glorify the kingdom of God and everything like that. If anything, it makes the demons upset, in my opinion. So, that all being said, do I believe that Isabel Briggs Myers was racist? From the information that I've seen so far, not really. But even if she were racist, does that mean that the Myers-Briggs type indicator and everything having to do with typology should just be chucked away, especially by black people? No, not really. If anything, I really would love to once again see more black people interested in this stuff. With our history, we avoid stuff like therapy. Like, we grew up thinking so many things, and more than any race, we probably need it more than anyone else with all the stuff that we've been through. You know what I'm saying? And so to have a tool now where we can better learn about ourselves and better our relationships with each other. And y'all know that we always bring the sauce wherever we go. Like, can you imagine now bringing like some sauce into the typology community? I had my younger cousin who watched my profiling session with my father, and he's back in the Bronx. And my mother told me that when they watched, then at the end when I started explaining through the verification process what the functions are and everything, my younger cousin was like, oh yeah, now Denzel's like doing that white people stuff. And I'm like, what? And so I did talk to him about it. I'm like, do you think that we black people are stupid, unintelligent, whatever? He's like, oh no. It's like, okay, so in that case, we should avoid calling stuff white people stuff, especially just because white people have dominated it. They've dominated something a lot of times mainly because we've just kept ourselves from going there. But self-help and self-improvement, personal development, learning about psychology, that should not be considered white people stuff, because that's the type of stuff that's going to help you have a better quality of your life. And if you just attribute that to white people stuff, then you are only harming yourself. And he's young, so, just like, he's literally probably like, I think he's like 13. So, we talked about that, and he actually really understood where I was coming from. And, when you grow up in the Bronx like that, then it's a very limited perspective a lot of times. So I had understanding and patience with him, but this is something that I wanted to like nip. I really love what my wife is doing on Instagram, Types in Black Ink. She works really hard on that page, and I would love if you guys, like show her love on that page, whether you're black or white. She is watching, black shows, like black sitcoms and stuff like that. She's using black characters, black celebrities to pretty much like even the ground, like no more Taylor Swift all the time. Like, oh, which Taylor Swift? Like, nothing's wrong with Taylor Swift, but like let's bring some more sauce into this. You know what I'm saying? And so let's not let this whole Myers-Briggs or Isabel Briggs racism thing be another reason that keeps black people from getting involved in the typology community. Please. And that's just my thoughts. But I would love to know what you guys think. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever, leave them below. Email me if you want coaching, if you want one-on-one talks about anything, if you want to be profiled, whatever. Be sure to check out the description where you'll find all of my social media and everything like that. Check out denzelmensah.com to be able to book a session with me. And yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks y'all for watching. I really appreciate this, and done. Thank you for taking time to watch that video. If you watched it, whether it be on regular speed or 2x speed, I appreciate it. And if you don't mind hitting that like button for me, it really helps this humble channel out. Also, if you haven't already subscribed and you like the content that I make, then be sure to subscribe and hit that bell button. That way you'll be able to keep in touch with all the new posts that I make. And then also be sure to check out my playlist where you'll be able to find a lot of my older videos, because I think that a lot of those have some great quality content too. But anyway, thanks again for watching. Make sure to leave comments, questions, book me for coaching sessions at denzelmensah.com, and God bless.